Beneath the throne world of Terra, deeper than the cathedrals that pierce its poisoned skies, deeper even than the vaults where forbidden archives slumber, there lies a secret older than the Imperium itself. It is a secret of hidden gates and unseen corridors, a labyrinth that does not belong to stone or steel, but to dimensions folded within dimensions. The ancients knew it as the Webway, a vast network carved through the fabric of reality, allowing passage between distant stars without the risk of the warp. To the Aeldari, the Webway was their greatest triumph, a crown jewel of mastery over both physics and sorcery. It was not a road, but a realm, a place between places, immune to the tides of the immaterium. Through it, their fleets traveled unseen, bypassing the dangers that crippled other races. It was their shield, their artery, and their throne room across the galaxy. The Emperor of mankind, in his dream of unifying all humanity, sought this gift for his own people. He had seen the dangers of the warp firsthand. He had watched psychers torn apart by its predators, fleets lost to storms, entire worlds consumed by demonic invasions. For his Imperium to endure, he knew that reliance upon the warp was a chain too fragile. Humanity needed a road of its own, a corridor safe from corruption, a fortress unbreached by demons. Thus was born the Webway Project. It was not conquest in the usual sense. It was a labor of infinite patience, of genius beyond mortal comprehension, and of risk so great that the future of mankind itself was gambled upon it. Deep beneath the imperial palace, the emperor set about to carve a human entrance into the Webway, to build a door that no other species had ever dared open. It was his most secret work, hidden even from the Primarchs, those demigod sons who had carried his banners across the stars. While the legions waged war in his name, while the Great Crusade forged humanity into an empire, the master of mankind toiled not upon battlefields, but in hidden chambers of Terra. He bent his will to machinery of both arcane and scientific craft. He sat upon a device that would one day become the Golden Throne, not as a coffin of survival, but as a key of ascension. For the Webway Project was more than a gateway. It was a promise. If completed, humanity would no longer be at the mercy of warp storms or demonic tides. Colonies would be bound by roads of light, not seas of madness. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that consumed thousands of lives each day, would no longer be needed. The Imperium would not merely survive, it would thrive, eternal and unbroken, like the ancient Aeldari had once dreamed. But dreams have weight, and the higher the dream, the deeper the fall. The Webway Project, conceived as humanity's salvation, would instead become its wound. For it was in those shadowed vaults beneath Terra that fate itself conspired to bring about the greatest betrayal the galaxy had ever known. Chapter 1. Before the gate was built. Before Terra was crowned by spires of stone and steel, before the Aquila spread its wings across 1,000,000 worlds, the galaxy was already haunted by the same shadow that plagues it now, the warp. This other realm, the immaterium, was no mere dimension, but a sea of thought and hunger. To mortals it seemed a tempest without horizon, its tides shifting with emotion, its storms swelling with belief. It offered passage across impossible distances, yet every journey was a gamble, for within that ocean swam predators of the soul. Humanity, like all younger races, had relied upon this treacherous medium, knowing no other way to span the stars. The Emperor of mankind had long known that this reliance was a fragile foundation. In the earliest days of humanity's ascent, he had walked the world in silence, a guardian unseen, guiding without declaring his presence. He had watched as psychers, untrained and vulnerable, were torn apart by demons. He had seen human colonies swallowed by warp storms, cut off from one another, their histories broken by the tides of unreality. He had learned, long before revealing himself, that a true future for mankind could not rest upon so unstable a sea. Yet the Emperor's knowledge was vast, older even than human memory. He remembered fragments of elder empires, long vanished into ash, and he understood that the warp was not the only path. The Aeldari, those ancient and tragic Xenos whose dominion had once stretched across the stars, had created a network unlike any other. Theirs was not a reliance upon the open immaterium, but upon hidden corridors carved through it. They called this network the Webway. The Webway was not a metaphor, but a place, an artificial lattice of tunnels and pocket realms, shielded from the full turbulence of the warp. Within it, ships and travelers could pass without fear of storms or predators, crossing the galaxy as though upon a hidden bridge. The Aeldari had thrived by this design, their empires connected by paths no outsider could breach. It was their triumph, their sanctuary, and their undoing, for when their arrogance led to the birth of Slaanesh, even the Webway trembled. The Emperor, in his vision, sought to craft such a refuge for mankind. To him, it was not mere imitation, but destiny. For he believed humanity to be the inheritor of the galaxy, a race that, through discipline and unity, might rise where others had fallen. But for this to be achieved, humanity needed a road immune to the warp's corruption. Without such a road, every colony was a candle at the mercy of storm winds, every fleet a gamble with damnation. The Webway project was conceived as the answer. Long before he revealed his great crusade, the Emperor laid the foundations of this design. Beneath the Himalayan mountains of Terra, in vaults older than empires, he forged his grandest device, the Golden Throne. It is known in this age as his tomb, the machine that sustains his withered body and fuels the Astronomicon. Yet this was not its first purpose. In the beginning, the Golden Throne was a key. It was designed as a stabilizer, a psychic fulcrum that could pry open a gate into the Webway without collapse. Through its power, humanity would have its own entrance into the hidden roads, secure and unassailable. This secret was guarded more closely than any other. Not even the Primarchs, those gene-forged sons who would one day lead the legions, were told the full truth. For the Emperor knew that secrecy was survival. To reveal his design was to invite sabotage, not merely from alien rivals, but from powers darker still. For the warp is no passive sea, but a predator that reacts to the will of those who resist it. Already, the gods of chaos, watching with hunger and dread, sought to undermine his plans. And so, while the Great Crusade thundered across the stars, while the legions reunited lost human worlds and cast down alien dominions, the Emperor withdrew from the front lines. To his sons and soldiers, this was a mystery. They wondered why he abandoned the conquest at its height, leaving command to Horus, his favored warmaster. Rumors spread of secret projects, of hidden works beneath the palace. Some saw it as betrayal, others as trust misplaced. But in truth, it was necessity. For the Webway project was greater than any single war, greater even than the Great Crusade itself. If it succeeded, all battles to come would be fought upon a foundation of certainty rather than chance. Within the subterranean vaults of Terra, laborers toiled in silence. The air was heavy with incense not of faith, but of chemical stabilizers meant to soothe the warp taint that lingered near the edges of the gate. Arcane machinery, neither wholly technological nor wholly psychic, groaned as it was set into place. The Emperor himself guided every stage, his mind alone vast enough to balance the equations, his will alone strong enough to hold the breach open. Each day was a test. Each night, if such a thing could be said to exist beneath Terra, was haunted by whispers pressing at the edges of the gate. The work was perilous, for the warp resented intrusion. Demons pressed against the unfinished walls, their claws scratching upon dimensions as though upon glass. At times, the wards trembled, and the chambers shook with echoes of screams not of mortal throats. To the custodes, the Emperor's golden guardians, who alone were permitted near the vault, these sounds were proof that they stood at the threshold of eternity. Some whispered that to gaze too long at the machinery was to glimpse a road stretching into infinity, a path that no human eyes should see. And yet, progress was made. The throne pulsed with power, its runes aglow with stabilizing light. The chamber resonated with energies older than speech. Slowly, painfully, the webway began to open. The first corridors glimmered, faint as dawnlight, promising roads into the hidden network of the ancients. For a brief time, it seemed as though the dream would succeed. But the warp does not yield so easily. Even as the Emperor worked, shadows gathered. The gods of chaos, thwarted by his silence, whispered into the hearts of men elsewhere. The Primarchs, left without their father's guidance, began to fester with doubt. Horus, beloved of all, would soon be struck by corruption. The heresy that would one day shatter the Imperium was already seated. And in the vaults beneath Terra, where the Emperor's greatest labor unfolded, the first tremors of disaster already stirred. The Webway project was not merely a work of genius. It was a gamble against eternity itself. And like all gambles played against the warp, the price of failure would be ruin beyond reckoning. Chapter 2. The Emperor's Hidden Design. When the Great Crusade thundered across the stars, it seemed to all the galaxy that the Emperor's gaze was fixed outward, that every fiber of his will was bent toward reclaiming the lost fragments of mankind. The legions marched, the Primarchs rose, and forgotten human colonies were bound once more beneath the banner of Terra. To the soldiers who bled, to the worlds that fell beneath compliance, it seemed that the master of mankind was everywhere at once. Yet in truth, his truest work lay not upon the battlefields of the stars, but in the deep vaults of Terra, where no light of sun or star could reach. For the Emperor's vision stretched beyond war. The legions were but tools, the Primarchs but instruments. Their purpose was conquest, but conquest was only the scaffolding of his design. He sought not merely dominion, but permanence. To him, the Great Crusade was a prelude, a necessary binding of scattered humanity into a single body before the true work could begin. That true work was the Webway project, a labor of secrecy greater than any victory won by bolter or blade. In the silent chambers beneath the Himalayan mountains, the Emperor bent his infinite will to the construction of the Golden Throne. To many, even in that age, it was an enigma, an arcane edifice of golden metal and radiant circuitry, its surface etched with runes no mortal tongue could decipher. To the Mechanicum adepts sworn to its construction, it was both miracle and heresy, a device that mingled science with forces older than the stars, a fusion of technologies they dared not question. What they saw as impossibility, the Emperor saw as inevitability. The throne was more than a machine. It was a lock and a key, a bridge and a barrier. Through its heart, the Emperor sought to stabilize a human breach into the Webway. By his own psychic power, amplified and focused through its infinite channels, the gate beneath Terra would be held open, safe, and immune to collapse. It would not merely grant humanity entry into the Aeldari's hidden lattice, it would allow them to claim it as their own. Once completed, the Webway would no longer belong to the fading Aeldari. It would belong to mankind, eternal and ascendant. Yet this vision was guarded in silence. Not even the Primarchs, who commanded the legions and were exalted as the Emperor's sons, were told its truth. Horus, his favored child, was given command of the crusade in his stead, but not the knowledge of what his father labored upon. Rogel Dorn, ever the sentinel, was entrusted with Terra's defense, but not with the reason why the palace's foundations shook with hidden power. Robut Gilliman, architect of empire, was permitted to govern entire realms, yet never shown the hidden chambers where destiny itself was being forged. This secrecy was not born of mistrust, but of necessity, for the Webway was a delicate prize. To reveal its existence was to invite not only envy but destruction. The gods of chaos, ever watchful, had not yet grasped the full scope of his ambition. If they learned that he sought to carve a human gateway into the one place their talons could not reach, their fury would know no bounds. The Emperor's silence was therefore not cruelty, but shield. His sons, however, could not know this. They felt only his absence, and in that absence their doubts grew. Above, the crusade flourished. The legions conquered with glory unmatched. The Ultramarines built empires of order. The Blood Angels inspired entire populations with their radiance. The Iron Warriors tore down fortresses that had stood unbroken for centuries. Humanity advanced as it had never advanced before, and yet, as victory followed victory, the Emperor withdrew further from the stars. To those who did not know the truth, it seemed as though he had abandoned them at the very height of triumph. Among the Primarchs, this wound deepened. Horus, newly appointed War Master, bore the burden of leadership in his father's name, but the weight of command was heavy. Others, proud and ambitious, questioned why Horus had been elevated while they were not. Lorgar, whose faith in the Emperor burned beyond reason, mistook his silence for disdain. Perturabo, ever craving recognition, saw in the absence of praise only further slight. Even those who remained steadfast wondered, why had their father turned away? Why did he not walk among them as once he had? The truth lay in the vaults. There, the Emperor labored not only to open the Webway, but to reforge the very foundation of human survival. He had seen what reliance upon the warp would bring. He had seen psychers torn apart by demonic claws, starships lost to storms, entire empires shattered by chaos's whims. If the Webway could be secured, none of this would matter. Humanity would no longer gamble with demons. They would travel on roads untouchable, wage wars on foundations unassailable, build an imperium beyond the reach of corruption. For a time, progress was real. The Golden Throne resonated with power. The first faint corridors into the Webway glimmered, stabilizing under his will. To the adepts who glimpsed it, it was a wonder beyond imagining. A road into infinity where time and space folded like parchment. Some swore they saw entire realms within, glimmering halls of impossible architecture, corridors wide enough for fleets, silent sanctums where reality itself bent in obedience to the Emperor's design. The promise was palpable. For the first time, it seemed as though mankind might truly inherit eternity. But the warp does not yield to conquest without answer. Even as the Emperor labored, the currents of chaos turned against him. Whispers festered in the hearts of his sons, planted by demons who feared the project's completion. Shadows stirred upon Davin, upon Colchis, upon worlds where the seeds of heresy were already sown. The legions began to fracture, though the full betrayal was yet to come. In the silence of the palace vaults, the Emperor bore this knowledge. He knew time was short, he knew the dream was fragile, and still he pressed onward, for to halt was to surrender all hope. Thus, the Webway project became not only a labor of genius, but of urgency. Each step forward was balanced against an empire unraveling. Each victory beneath Terra was shadowed by unrest among the stars. The Emperor could not explain, he could not reveal. To do so was to doom the project itself. And so he bore their resentment in silence, accepting their misunderstanding as the cost of salvation. The dream remained bright in his mind, a human webway, infinite and inviolate, a future where no demon could ever reach them, where warp storms were irrelevant, where fleets traveled in certainty, and worlds remained bound together forever. It was a vision beyond conquest, beyond even empire. It was the promise of peace, the only one mankind could ever truly possess. But dreams are fragile things. And in the silence of the vaults, the first fractures had already begun to spread. Chapter 3. The Unseen War in the Vaults. In the depths beneath the imperial palace, where mortal eyes could not gaze without madness, the Webway project unfolded not as a quiet labor, but as a hidden war. Few among humanity ever knew of it. Fewer still survived long enough to speak of what they had witnessed. For the chamber where the Golden Throne stood was not merely a construction site, but a battlefield where the warp itself resisted the Emperor's will. At first, the labor seemed a triumph. The throne pulsed with power, its engines channeling psychic energy into the gate. Golden light spilled across the vaults as the first corridors began to stabilize. Custodians, those golden guardians sworn to the Emperor's side, spoke of glimpsing halls stretching into infinity, pathways etched with impossible symmetry, a realm neither of the warp nor of real space, but something between. For a time, hope kindled. It seemed that humanity might indeed inherit the road of the ancients. But the warp is never silent. It seethes with awareness, with predatory will. The Emperor's attempt to carve a human breach into the webway did not go unnoticed. From the Immaterium's depths, demons gathered like sharks, scenting blood. They pressed against the unfinished gate, their claws scraping against the wards, their whispers gnawing at the edges of sanity. At first, the pressure was faint, like distant waves lapping upon stone. But with each passing day as the project advanced, the storm grew louder. Then came the first breach. It began as a ripple in the vaults, a tremor that shook the very bedrock beneath Terra. Runes upon the throne flickered, their glow dimming as the stabilizers faltered. A scream echoed, though no mortal mouth uttered it, and then, with a sound like tearing silk, the barrier tore. From the wound spilled shapes of nightmare. Demons, clad in flesh that was not flesh, howling with laughter that shattered reason. The custodians met them first, clad in auramite, wielding guardian spears that blazed with power. They held the line in silence. To the outside world, they were ever the Emperor's shining warriors, paragons of discipline and grace. But in the vaults, their struggle was desperate. They fought not for conquest, but for containment. For every daemon struck down, another pressed through the wound. Their golden armor gleamed in the fire of unreality, their oaths tested against horrors that defied description. Beside them labored adepts of the Mechanicum, their machine bodies trembling as they worked to stabilize the throne's runes. Incantations of binary prayer mingled with screams as demons tore them apart, their blood hissing upon the machinery they sought to preserve. The Emperor himself strode among them, radiant as a sun, his psychic might burning away entire hosts in moments. Yet even his strength was tested. For each breach sealed, another threatened. The warp's fury was endless, its hunger without limit. The war beneath Terra raged unseen while above, the great crusade marched on. To the legions, victories were won across the stars. To the Primarchs, wars of compliance consumed their attention. None of them knew that in the heart of their father's palace, a battle greater than any they fought was already unfolding. Here, in silence and secrecy, the Emperor bore the brunt of the warp's hatred, shielding his people not with armies but with his very soul. The corridors glimpsed within the webway were vast and strange. Some gleamed with crystalline walls, reflecting light like mirrors of eternity. Others stretched into shadowed caverns where impossible geometries twisted endlessly. At times, custodians swore they saw Aeldari wards flicker in the distance, ancient defenses still active from a time before humanity's rise. These glimpses were proof that the road existed, that it could be claimed. And yet, each step forward drew greater resistance. The demons would not yield. They poured against the breach, shrieking hatred for the one who dared to invade their untouchable realm. The Emperor's power was unmatched, but even he was not infinite. His presence upon the throne was constant, his mind focused with unbroken intensity to hold the gate open and warded. Hours bled into days, days into months. The strain grew heavy. The custodians saw it in his face, though none dared speak. His body did not falter, but his aura burned with such intensity that mortals could scarcely stand in his presence. He was becoming less man and more god, a figure aflame with psychic radiance. It is said in later custodian accounts that this war beneath Terra lasted years, though time itself seemed strange within those vaults. Battles blurred into one another, victories measured not in ground gained, but in hours bought. The demons never ceased. They clawed, they howled, they hurled themselves against the walls of the breach in waves unending. For them, it was not merely defiance, it was vengeance. The Emperor's design threatened to starve them, to banish them from feeding upon mankind's fears. To let him succeed was to see their dominion wither, and so they raged with the fury of extinction. The custodians adapted. No longer merely guardians of the palace, they became warriors of the unseen war. They fought in silence, their oaths unrecorded, their battles unacknowledged. Some fell, their bodies unremembered by history, their sacrifice erased by secrecy. Others endured, their names preserved only in the sealed annals of the Tower of Hegemon. They became a brotherhood apart, defined not by triumphs known to the Imperium, but by vigil in shadow. Despite the fury, progress continued. The Emperor pressed onward, his will unyielding. Portions of the webway stabilized long enough for human passage. Custodians marched its halls, exploring corridors untouched by Aeldari for millennia. For a brief moment, the dream seemed within reach. Humanity stood upon the edge of a new age, a road that would carry them beyond the warp's tyranny. The Emperor's silence, his absence from the crusade, seemed vindicated. Yet shadows stirred even then. The demonic pressure grew heavier, the breaches multiplied, and above, far from Terra, the seeds of heresy ripened in the hearts of his sons. The Emperor knew, though he could not speak it, that he was racing against a storm. The Webway project must be secured before the legions shattered, before chaos struck openly. Time was his enemy as surely as the demons clawing at the breach. The unseen war beneath Terra was a crucible. It proved the Emperor's strength, the custodian's devotion, the mechanicum's sacrifice. But it also revealed the fragility of the dream. For every corridor stabilized, another trembled. For every hour bought, another was lost. The war was endless, and though victory was not yet denied, its cost grew heavier with each passing moment. And above, in the void, Horus was already beginning to turn. Chapter 4. Shadows Stirring. The Seeds of Catastrophe. The Webway project advanced in silence, its wars hidden from the galaxy, its promise known only to the Emperor and the few permitted to serve at his side. Yet secrecy, while it shielded the work from enemies without, bred shadows within. For while the Emperor labored in the depths, his sons waged the great crusade above, and in his absence, doubt and resentment began to fester. The Primarchs had been created to be his generals, his companions, and his reflections. Each bore a fragment of his infinite potential. Each commanded a legion forged in his name. They were meant to be brothers, united in purpose, but they were also flawed, shaped by the worlds upon which they had been cast, by the trials of their youth, by the peculiarities of their natures. Their strength was also their weakness. Left without their father's presence, those flaws grew unchecked. At first, the absence was explained away. The Emperor had appointed Horus as War Master, entrusting him with supreme command of the crusade. To most, this seemed an honor beyond compare, a testament to Horus's brilliance and loyalty. Yet beneath that honor lurked a wound, for other Primarchs, proud and ambitious, chafed under their brother's authority. Angron raged at any chain placed upon him. Perturabo seethed at recognition denied. Lorgar, whose devotion to his father had turned into worship, saw the Emperor's withdrawal not as trust, but as rejection. Even Rogel Dorn, ever steadfast, felt the silence keenly, though he bore it without complaint. The Emperor did not explain his labor. He could not. To speak of the Webway project was to endanger it. To reveal it was to draw the gaze of chaos more fully upon it. And so he remained silent, working in the vaults while his sons misinterpreted his absence. To Horus, burdened with command, it seemed a sign that he alone was trusted. To others it appeared favoritism. To Lorgar it was betrayal. Chaos, patient and cunning, whispered into these wounds. It did not strike openly at first. Instead, it sowed doubt, feeding upon pride and resentment. Horus, once the most loyal, became the most vulnerable. Upon Davin, he was struck by a blade steeped in corruption, his soul drawn into visions within the warp. There, the gods of ruin offered him truths twisted into poison. They showed him images of betrayal, of a father who would discard him, of brothers who would supplant him. They promised him dominion, not servitude. And in his wounded pride, Horus listened. While the War Master turned, the Webway trembled. The Emperor, seated upon the golden throne, felt the pressure of demons pressing harder, as though the Immaterium itself sensed its victory approaching. The breaches multiplied. The battles grew fiercer. Custodians fell in greater number, their sacrifice unrecorded by any chronicle. Mechanicum adepts burned out their minds holding stabilizers intact. And still, the Emperor pressed forward, for he knew time was running short. In Colchis, Lorgar preached heresy, worshipping the Emperor as a god despite his command against it. In Nostramo, Conrad Curza sank deeper into visions of inevitable doom. Perturabo, embittered, whispered of chains forged by ungrateful brothers. Everywhere, the fractures widened. What the Emperor had feared was coming to pass. The dream of unity was unraveling, even as the foundation of permanence was not yet secured. The project itself grew unstable. The Golden Throne strained under the Emperor's ceaseless effort. Its circuits glowed white-hot, its wards groaned beneath psychic pressure. The custodians guarding the vaults spoke in hushed tones of corridors collapsing within the Webway, of entire passages unraveling into storms of unreality. Some swore they glimpsed Aeldari phantoms beyond the gates, their ancient wards stirring against intrusion. Others whispered that the demons pressed harder because they knew the Primarchs were faltering, that the warp itself could sense the Emperor's dream slipping away. This was the paradox of his design. To reveal it was to risk its destruction. To conceal it was to risk misunderstanding. The Primarchs could not see the hidden war he waged. They saw only his silence, his absence, his apparent neglect. To them, he was no longer the guiding father of their youth, but a distant figure consumed by mysteries they could not share. Into that void chaos poured its poison. Horus's corruption spread like fire through dry tinder. Legions swore loyalty to him, believing his lies of betrayal and tyranny. Brother turned against brother, oath against oath. What had once been the Emperor's great host fractured into rival camps, their banners soon to clash in wars bloodier than any fought against alien foes. The heresy was born in whispers, in doubts, in shadows, long before it erupted in open flame. And beneath Terra, the Webway gate trembled on the brink of collapse. The Emperor knew. He felt the storm gathering. Yet still he labored, for to abandon the project was unthinkable. If he could stabilize the Webway, if he could grant humanity the safety of those hidden roads, then even the heresy might be endured. Even betrayal might be withstood. But if the project failed, if the breach was lost, then the Imperium's future would be bound forever to the warp's mercies. It was a gamble he was unwilling to concede. The custodians called this era the Shadowed Vigil. They stood at his side, fighting demons unseen, while their brothers above prepared for wars they did not yet understand. They bore the burden of secrecy, their sacrifices unrecorded, their victories unsung. They knew that history would never remember them, that the Imperium would never know the war they had fought. And still they endured, for the Emperor willed it, and his will was their law. But shadows spread. Above, Horus prepared to raise the banner of rebellion. Below, the Webway gate shook with each demonic assault. The Emperor, radiant and unyielding, fought on both fronts, holding back the warp in silence, while his empire above fractured under his son's betrayal. The seeds of catastrophe were sown, watered by silence and nourished by pride. The Webway project, once humanity's greatest promise, was now entwined with its greatest doom. Chapter 5. The Horus. Heresy and the Shattered Gate. The galaxy convulsed in betrayal. Horus, once beloved son and war master, raised the banner of rebellion. His legions, twisted by pride and corrupted by the whispers of chaos, turned their blades not upon alien foes but upon their brothers. The Great Crusade, once a tide of unity, fractured into a war of annihilation. Worlds burned, fleets shattered, and brotherhood became slaughter. To the Imperium it seemed as though the sun itself had fallen, and in many ways it had. Yet, while the stars above blazed with war, another war raged still deeper. Beneath the Imperial Palace, within the hidden vaults where the Golden Throne pulsed, the Webway project teetered upon the edge of collapse. The Emperor's absence from the crusade had been for this labor. Now his sons had mistaken it for neglect, and in their betrayal, they ensured that his greatest work would never be completed. For the heresy did not merely shatter armies, it unbound the very foundation of the Emperor's design. As the traitor legions marched, the warp surged with renewed fury. The gods of chaos, empowered by the betrayal of the Primarchs, poured their strength into breaking the hidden gate beneath Terra. The demonic assaults that had once come in waves now crashed like storms. The breaches multiplied faster than they could be sealed. The Emperor, seated upon the throne, directed his psychic will with all the intensity of a star, burning hosts of demons into nothingness. Yet even his radiance faltered under such endless strain. The custodians fought in silence, their golden armor blackened by demonic fire. They waged a war no mortal was meant to see, each battle a nightmare of twisted geometries and impossible foes. They stood shoulder to shoulder in tunnels, half real, their guardian spears blazing with light that pierced through horrors without name. For every demon banished, 3 more pressed against the breach. For every corridor stabilized, another tore open. The war in the Webway had become unwinnable. Legends speak of chambers within the breach where reality itself unraveled. Custodians swore that entire cohorts were lost without a trace, their names erased from memory as though they had never lived. Mechanicum adepts, driven to madness by exposure, clawed their own flesh while chanting equations in voices not their own. It is said that the Emperor himself strode through halls where demonic princes sought to bar his way, his presence alone reducing them to ash. Yet even he could not be everywhere at once. The project was crumbling faster than even his will could sustain. And above, the storm closed upon Terra. Horus's fleets encircled the cradle of humanity. His legions prepared to strike at the very palace beneath which the project faltered. The siege of Terra began. The heavens burned with void war, and the ground shook with bombardment. The custodians who fought in the vaults now heard, through walls of stone and time, the thunder of traitor guns striking the palace above. Two wars converged, one fought in real space, the other in the Webway's shadow. It was then that the decision was made. The Emperor could no longer devote himself wholly to the project. The Webway breach, though held by his will, threatened to collapse entirely, unleashing a demonic flood into the heart of Terra itself. To abandon it outright would mean damnation for all mankind, for the demons would pour through unchecked, drowning the palace, the world, perhaps the galaxy itself. But to sustain it fully was no longer possible, not while Horus's rebellion demanded his presence above. Thus, the project was abandoned, not in surrender, but in grim necessity. The Emperor's will shifted. The throne, once a key meant to open the gate, became instead a prison meant to hold it shut. The breach could not be erased, but it could be sealed, bound by his presence. The Webway was lost to humanity, its promise shattered. What remained was a scar, a wound locked behind golden machinery, requiring ceaseless effort to contain. The dream of roads free from warp storms was gone. In its place stood a tomb, a burden that would demand endless sacrifice. The custodians fought their last battles in those halls. They bought time with blood, sealing corridors with their lives, standing against tides of demons so that the Emperor might repurpose the throne. Some were never seen again, their fate swallowed by shadow. Others emerged scarred beyond healing, their silence heavier than before. They did not speak of what they had seen, for to speak of it was to give voice to horrors best left buried. When the siege of Terra reached its height, the Emperor rose from the throne to confront his fallen son. In the battle aboard Horus's flagship, the War Master was slain, but the Emperor was mortally wounded. His body, broken beyond healing, was borne back to the throne, the very device he had once crafted as the key to mankind's future. No longer would it open paths of light. Instead, it became his coffin, his prison, his beacon. Seated upon it, he became neither living nor dead, a silent guardian whose will alone held the breach sealed. Thus ended the Webway project. Its promise of salvation dissolved into necessity, its triumph into tragedy. What was meant to free humanity from the warp instead bound it to the throne forever. The Astronomicon was born, a beacon to guide ships through the storms of the immaterium, but at a cost unending. Thousands sacrificed each day, fed into the throne so that the light might burn. Humanity's road was not safety, but suffering. Its empire was not secured by peace, but by ceaseless sacrifice. The heresy had shattered more than legions, more than worlds. It had shattered the one work that might have delivered mankind from the storm. The Emperor's silence, his absence, his secrecy, all had been for the Webway. And when it was lost, so too was the dream of permanence. What remained was endurance, not triumph, not ascension, but a long night of survival. The shattered gate beneath Terra still smolders, even now. The custodians keep their vigil. The throne still hums with power, its runes flickering as it holds back the tide. But the Webway lies beyond reach, a reminder of what might have been, a monument to failure and necessity alike. It was here in those hidden vaults that the future of humanity was changed forever. Chapter 6. The Birth of the Golden Throne's Curse. The siege of Terra ended with silence and smoke. Horus, the War Master, the brightest star of the Great Crusade, lay annihilated by the Emperor's hand. Yet victory was bitter, for it had demanded a price beyond reckoning. The Emperor himself, mortally wounded, was carried back to the Imperial Palace. His body, broken and failing, could not survive without aid. No surgeon's skill, no mechanicum rite, no Primarch's devotion could preserve him. There remained only one place for him to endure, the Golden Throne. This was the device he had once forged as a key to the Webway, a mechanism of passage and promise. Now it became something far darker. For the throne was no longer a bridge, but a prison. Its infinite circuitry, its ancient wards, its fusion of science and sorcery, all that once had been meant to stabilize a gateway was repurposed to hold back a flood. The breach into the Webway, left unfinished, remained unstable. Demons still pressed against it, clawing and shrieking to be free. Without the Emperor's will to bind it, they would have poured into Terra, devouring the throne world in days. Thus, the Emperor was enthroned. His broken body was fused to the machine, his spirit chained to the ceaseless task of containment. No longer did he stride among his people, radiant and commanding. No longer did his sons hear his voice. Instead, he became the silent sentinel upon the throne. Neither alive nor dead, his psychic might burning eternally to hold the gate shut. What had been meant as liberation became curse. To sustain the Emperor's vigil, sacrifices were required. Thousands of psychers, gathered from across the Imperium, were bound daily to the throne and drained of their lives. Their souls fed its engines, their deaths fuel for the Emperor's unbroken will. Each day the toll was renewed. Each day another tide of the faithful was led into the palace to die so that mankind might endure another sunrise. From this prison of necessity was born the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that shines across the warp. It is this beacon that guides humanity's ships through the storms of the immaterium. Without it, travel would be blind, communication impossible, the Imperium fractured into isolated fragments. The Astronomicon became both miracle and chain. It was salvation, but it was also proof of failure. For had the Webway project succeeded, it would never have been needed. Humanity would have traveled the hidden roads of light, untouchable by storm or demon. Instead, it was bound forever to a beacon of sacrifice, reliant upon the suffering of the many to preserve the silence of one. The throne, once a promise of eternity, became a wound that never closed. The custodians who had fought the demons within the vaults now became wardens of a prison whose bars they could never leave. They watched as the Emperor's form withered, his body decaying even as his spirit blazed brighter than any star. They guarded the sanctum not as a shrine of triumph, but as a tomb where their master endured unending torment. Their oaths deepened, their silence grew heavier. They spoke little of the Webway War, and even less of the throne's true purpose. To the Imperium above, it became simply the Emperor's seat of power, a symbol of his eternal rule. The truth, that it was a lock holding back damnation, was hidden, buried beneath incense and ritual. The Mechanicum, too, bore scars. Their adepts who had labored upon the throne knew what it had been meant to achieve, and what it had become. Many were slain in the purges that followed, their knowledge silenced so that the Imperium might not fracture beneath despair. Others recorded their understanding in sealed vaults, forbidden to all but the highest ranks of the priesthood. In time, even they forgot their records buried beneath layers of dogma and worship. The Golden Throne became a relic beyond comprehension, a machine revered but not understood, a god engine in which the god emperor sat in silence. And so the curse was complete. The Webway project, once conceived to free humanity from the warp, instead bound it more tightly than ever. The Astronomicon shone, but only as long as sacrifice sustained it. The Imperium endured, but only upon foundations of endless death. The Emperor remained, but not as father or guide, only a silent flame, his will bound to a single, unending task. For the people of the Imperium, this truth was transformed into faith. They could not be told that their master's greatest work had failed. They could not be told that their lives were spent merely to keep a wound from spilling open. Instead, they were taught that the Emperor had ascended, that his silence was divine mystery, that his suffering was sacrifice freely chosen. Cathedrals rose across the stars, proclaiming him a god. Pilgrims journeyed to Terra, weeping in awe before the palace's walls. His throne was not spoken of as prison, but as altar. His silence was not absence, but presence. Yet the custodians knew. The throne's runes flickered beneath their watch. The wards strained against pressures no human mind could imagine. They alone stood vigil over the truth, that the Emperor was not enthroned in majesty, but imprisoned in ceaseless struggle. They bore that knowledge in silence, for to reveal it would be to shatter the faith of billions. Better that the Imperium endure upon illusion than crumble beneath despair. The curse deepened with each passing century. The psyker toll grew greater as the Imperium expanded. Ships by the thousands depended upon the Astronomicon. Worlds relied upon its light to remain bound together. Without it, the Imperium would fragment into dust. Yet each year, the price grew heavier. Each year, more lives were fed into the throne's hunger. The machine was never repaired, never improved, only maintained by rites whose true purpose even the Mechanicum barely remembered. It was a device meant for triumph, now locked in eternal decay. Thus, the Golden Throne became the heart of the Imperium, a heart that beat not with hope, but with sacrifice. Its curse defined the empire of man. Where once the Emperor had sought permanence and safety, now his people endured only through ritual and death. The Webway lay beyond their reach, sealed forever by his agony. The future that might have been was lost. What remained was survival, stretched across 10,000 years of war. The throne is curse and salvation, beacon and prison. Its hum is the sound of mankind's endurance, and its silence would be the death of all. Upon it, the Emperor endures, and through it, so does humanity. Unchanged, unhealed, unfree. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Lost Dream. Though the Webway project had collapsed, its shadow lingered. In the 10,000 years since the siege of Terra, whispers of what was lost have never fully faded. Most within the Imperium know nothing of it. To them, the Golden Throne has always been the seat of the God Emperor, a holy relic, the source of the Astronomicon. They do not ask why it consumes thousands of lives daily, nor do they question why it hums with unending hunger. But in the sealed archives, in the secret oaths of the Adeptus Custodes, in the deepest vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, fragments remain, echoes of a dream abandoned. The custodians remember most keenly. They were there when the first demons poured through the unfinished gate, when golden halls were painted with shadow and blood. They know the price that was paid in silence, the brothers who fell in battles never recorded. Among their traditions, there are rituals of remembrance unknown to any outside their ranks. It is said that in the Tower of Hegemon, each custodian swears his oath before a flame said to be kindled from the first wards of the Webway vaults. To them, the throne is not a symbol of majesty, but of ceaseless duty. Their silence on this matter is not born of ignorance, but of loyalty. Loyalty to the Emperor's will that the truth remain hidden. The Mechanicum, too, bears fragments of the story. In the sealed vaults of Mars, certain tech priests whisper of schematics that show the throne's original design. To study them is heresy punishable by death, yet still they endure, passed in binary prayers between those who dare to look too closely. Some claim that the throne's runes are not merely wards, but conduits meant to open passages wider than any starship corridor, roads that could have spanned the galaxy. They speak of lost chambers within the machine, unfinished components that hint at functions no longer understood. To them, the throne is not merely a prison, but a broken wonder, a machine that might have remade humanity's future had it been allowed to succeed. Among the Inquisition, rumors of the Webway War are spoken only in veiled terms. Some inquisitors suspect, but few have proof. The Ordo Malleus, in particular, guards fragments of testimony that suggest a demonic incursion beneath the palace during the heresy. These scraps are filed away under endless seals, forbidden from open discussion. For to admit the truth, that Terra itself once stood on the brink of being consumed by the warp from below, is to risk panic beyond measure. Better, they reason, that the story remain buried, its echoes muffled by the weight of time. Yet myths persist. Pilgrims tell tales of chambers beneath Terra where the Emperor still battles demons in silence. They speak of golden guardians walking endless tunnels, their eyes burning with light not of this world. They whisper that the sacrifices made daily to the throne are not merely to sustain the Astronomicon, but to feed the Emperor's strength as he fights in realms unseen. These stories, though unapproved, spread among the faithful like embers carried by wind. To them, the Webway is not a failed project, but a hidden battlefield where their god still wages war. The Aeldari, too, remember, for the Webway was their creation, and they know when its walls tremble. In the oldest libraries of the craft worlds, records speak of a human attempt to breach the lattice, an intrusion both audacious and desperate. Some claim that the Emperor's will nearly succeeded, that his strength alone was enough to hold a gate open where even the Aeldari's greatest artificers had faltered. Others see it as folly, proof of humanity's arrogance. Yet even among the Aeldari there is unease, for if mankind had gained the Webway, it might have eclipsed them forever. That they did not is both relief and omen, for it means humanity remains bound to the same storms that doomed the Aeldari in the end. Legends also circulate of what might have been. Some imperial scholars, daring enough to speculate, write cautiously of a golden age that never came. They imagine an imperium bound by stable roads of light, free from warp storms and demonic intrusion. They picture colonies safe from isolation, fleets that never risked annihilation in the immaterium, psychers who did not burn themselves out as navigators in the tides. In this vision, the Astronomicon would never have been needed, the daily sacrifices never demanded. The Imperium might have become not a fortress besieged, but a civilization unbroken. These are dangerous thoughts. To hope for what might have been is perilously close to heresy. Yet still such speculations persist, whispered in quiet academies and hidden scriptoria. Among the custodians there are darker myths. Some believe that the breach beneath Terra still stirs, that the demons have not ceased their assault, that the Emperor's spirit is still locked in battle within the Webway's shadow. They tell of dreams where golden corridors blaze with light, then collapse into shadow, and of hearing the echo of his voice, urging them to vigilance. To them, the throne is not only a prison for the emperor's body, but a battlefield for his soul. Their silence on this matter is absolute, for even among their number, such whispers carry the weight of dread. The echoes of the Webway project linger also in relics. Certain artifacts are said to originate from those hidden battles. There are custodian blades etched with runes that shine brighter when demons draw near. There are fragments of crystalline walls, preserved in reliquaries, that some claim were taken from stabilized corridors of the Webway itself. In the Adeptus Mechanicus, rumors tell of schematics etched onto stasis-sealed plates, their diagrams half burned, their meaning half lost. Each fragment is a puzzle piece of a picture no one dares complete. In the great expanse of the Imperium, these echoes are but whispers. Most will never know them. To the common faithful, the Emperor's throne is a holy seat, his silence a sign of divine sacrifice. They kneel before altars, not knowing that beneath their prayers lies a wound that never closed. They believe the sacrifices of psychers are acts of devotion, not realizing they are fuel to keep a prison locked. For them, the dream of the Webway is not remembered at all. It is erased, buried in silence deeper than the vaults themselves. Yet, for those few who know, the lost dream endures. It is a vision of what humanity might have been, a golden road that could have led them beyond fear. It is also a reminder of their fragility, that even the Emperor's greatest work can falter, that even gods in flesh can fail. These echoes are not merely fragments of history. They are warnings, preserved in silence, whispered by those who remember but dare not speak. The Webway project is forgotten by most, remembered by few, and believed by almost none. Yet its shadow touches all. Every psyker who dies upon the throne is an echo of that failure. Every ship that sails the warp by the Astronomican's light is a reminder of the road not taken. Every hymn sung to the God Emperor is, unknowingly, a song of mourning for the dream that was lost. Thus the echoes endure, not in triumph, not in hope, but in silence. Chapter 8. Approaching the end of the cycle. 10,000 years have passed since the Golden Throne became both beacon and prison. Across those millennia, the Imperium has endured, not through triumph, but through attrition, not by hope, but by sacrifice. The Webway project, which once promised liberation, is forgotten by most, remembered only in whispers. Yet its shadow still shapes the Imperium's fate. For the breach beneath Terra has never closed. It has only been held shut, sealed by the Emperor's will, fed by the deaths of uncounted psychers. And now, as the 41st millennium wanes, the cycle nears its end. The throne is failing. Even among the Mechanicum adepts who treat its workings as sacred mystery, there are murmurs that its systems are decaying. Circuits burn without repair, mechanisms corrode, and arcane glyphs flicker with uncertain light. The Emperor's will remains vast, yet the machine that binds it falters. Tech priests whisper in binary prayers of subsystems that collapse entirely, patched over with rituals that are more superstition than science. They admit in silence that they no longer understand the throne, that they maintain only fragments of what it once was. Its original purpose, as key to the Webway, has been lost even in memory. The Adeptus Custodes watch more keenly still. They see the strain upon their master. They feel the tremors that ripple through the vaults when demons press harder against the breach. They know that if the throne were to fail, the floodgates would open. The warp would spill into the heart of Terra. The palace would become a pit of madness. The throne world devoured, the Imperium decapitated. For this reason, their vigilance has never slackened. They train not for wars of conquest, but for the final battle they know must one day come. The battle within the palace itself when the breach reopens. Rumors spread among the faithful that the Emperor stirs upon the throne. Some claim to hear his voice in dreams, urging them to endurance. Others whisper that his silence is not death, but metamorphosis, that one day he will rise renewed, no longer bound to flesh, but as a god reborn. Such whispers are declared heresy by the ecclesiarchy, yet they spread nonetheless, carried by hope and desperation. In the deepest prayers, many believe that the Emperor is not merely holding back the tide, but preparing for his return. Yet there are darker prophecies. The Inquisition guards them in vaults, but fragments escape. Some seers claim that the throne is on the verge of total collapse, that its failure will coincide with the unraveling of the Astronomicon. Should that light extinguish, the Imperium would shatter instantly into isolation, each world cut off, each fleet stranded. Warp storms would rise unchecked, demons would spill freely, and mankind would be left defenseless. Others whisper of something worse, that the breach itself has grown, that if it opens, the warp will not merely touch Terra but consume it whole, remaking the throne world into a portal of chaos unrivaled in history. The Aeldari, ever-watchers of fate, speak of this doom in their own tongues. Some claim that humanity's failure to master the Webway was not accident, but destiny, that their race, like the Aeldari before them, is doomed to stumble upon its own pride. The Harlequins, keepers of the ancient laughing god's tales, weave stories of a golden throne that is both key and coffin, a seat of silence where salvation was lost. They do not speak of its end, but their silence on the matter is telling. In the Imperium itself, preparations are unspoken but constant. The Psyker tithe grows greater with each year, as more and more are fed into the throne. The black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica scour the galaxy ceaselessly, carrying their human cargo to Terra, where death awaits them in fire and shadow. Billions of lives have already been sacrificed, and still the demand rises. Each death buys another day, another hour, another heartbeat of survival. It is a rhythm of endurance that cannot continue forever. And yet the Imperium endures. Guilliman has returned, bearing the mantle of his father's empire, leading the Indomitus crusade across a galaxy split by the Great Rift. His reforms have breathed some measure of strength into a realm long stagnant. But even he, the most steadfast of the Primarchs, knows the truth. In his writings, he admits that the Imperium is already a shadow of what it might have been. He rules not a realm of reason, but a theocracy of ritual and fear. And he confesses, if only in the privacy of his thoughts, that the Golden Throne is a curse that cannot endure forever. The cycle approaches its end. The Webway project began as a dream of safety beyond the warp. It became a wound sealed by sacrifice. And now, as the galaxy shudders with war and the throne falters, the question is not whether the cycle will break, but when. The Imperium is weary. Its faith sustains it, but faith cannot mend failing circuits. Its armies bleed endlessly, but bolters cannot silence demons clawing at the breach. Its emperor endures, but even gods in flesh may not endure forever. Some whisper that a second chance may yet come, that the throne may be repaired, that the breach may yet be stabilized, that humanity may still inherit the Webway. Others dismiss such thoughts as folly. To them, the cycle is already closed. The dream is lost, the curse eternal, the end inevitable. Whether in a single cataclysm or in slow attrition, they say, the Imperium is doomed to fall. Yet amid these shadows, humanity endures as it always has. Guardsmen still march, pilgrims still kneel, psychers still give their lives, the throne still hums, the breach still holds. The Webway project, though long abandoned, still defines their fate. They live not in the dawn it might have brought, but in the twilight it left behind. The cycle is not ended yet, but its ending draws nearer with every passing day. And so, the story of the Webway project draws to its close. It began not as a tale of conquest or blood, but as a vision, a dream that mankind might step beyond the storms of the warp, that its empire might endure not upon sacrifice but upon certainty. The Emperor of mankind, in his silence and in his brilliance, sought to claim for humanity what the Aeldari had once known. A road between the stars untouched by demons, a sanctuary immune to ruin. That dream failed. The breach beneath Terra became not a triumph, but a wound. The Golden Throne, crafted as a key to eternity, became instead a prison of ceaseless suffering. The Emperor, who once strode among his sons, who commanded worlds with a glance and armies with a word, was bound in silence. His will sustains the Imperium still, but not as a guide, only as a beacon, a lock against the flood. For 10,000 years, humanity has endured upon the ashes of that failure. They believe the throne to be a miracle, not a scar. They kneel in prayer before it, never knowing that it is fueled by endless death, that every ship guided by the Astronomicon is steered by the blood of thousands. They do not know of the corridors that might have been, of the future that could have freed them. They know only survival, and in that survival they call it victory. But you, listener, now know more. You have walked with me through the hidden vaults, stood beside golden guardians in their unseen vigil, heard the echo of the demons clawing against the sealed gate. You have glimpsed what was lost and what it has cost. The Webway project was not merely an experiment. It was the one chance humanity had to rise above fear. Its failure ensured that fear would be their inheritance forever. Even so, the Imperium endures. Candles still burn in the dark. Voices still pray to a god who never speaks. Ships still cross the warp by a light that flickers but does not fail. And in the silence of the throne, the Emperor still fights, unseen, unyielding, bound to his people until the end of all things. Perhaps one day the cycle will break. Perhaps the throne will fail, and the breach will open, and the long night will swallow all. Or perhaps another chance will come, another dream, another road. Until then, the Webway remains closed, and the Emperor remains enthroned, not as a ruler, but as a flame that burns forever, guarding his people in silence.